Okay, let's unpack this. If you work in child welfare, maybe DFPS, CPS, you know the situations I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Intense doesn't even begin to cover it sometimes.
Right, you're face to face with raw emotion, high stakes, crisis moments. You're trying to build trust with families under, well, immense pressure.
Supporting kids who've seen and experienced things that are just hard to fathom.
And having conversations that, frankly, most people would run a mile from. It demands so much, doesn't it? Effective communication, often when you're stressed yourself.
You need to de-escalate, you need to connect, you need to understand what's really going on underneath.
And sometimes, maybe often, it feels like you're just winging it, relying on instinct, or hoping those, soft skills are going to cut it.
Which is completely understandable. These aren't just tricky office conversations. We're talking about people in profound distress. Behavior can seem unpredictable. Communication just breaks down.
And intuition, while it has its place, it isn't always enough, is it? It's not consistent. It doesn't give you a map when you're really lost.
Exactly. Especially when the stakes involve a child's safety and well-being, you need something more reliable.
Something more structured, maybe even technical.
That's precisely the idea behind what we're digging into today. There's a system called the S.T.A.R.S. matrix.
And the sources we looked at position it as something quite different, not just another communication workshop.
Right. S.T.A.R.S. moves beyond just like tips and tricks or personality styles. It's presented as a technical, science-based method.
Okay, technical and science-based applied to these intensely human situations. That sounds intriguing.
It is. It's not just about what you say, but about understanding the underlying machinery of language and thought that's operating during these difficult moments for everyone involved.
And it's built on a specific scientific foundation.
Yes, a psychological science called Relational Frame Theory, RFT for short.
RFT.
It provides the behavioral science principles that S.T.A.R.S. is built upon, how language actually works to shape our experience and behavior.
And we should credit the developer, Dr. Stephen Gonzalez. He developed the S.T.A.R.S. system itself.
That's right. So our mission today for this deep dive is to really unpack these sources you've gathered. We want to get a handle on how this S.T.A.R.S. matrix, using RFT, and this concept of relational framing, how it offers a technical framework.
Not just soft skills, but actual techniques grounded in science.
Exactly. A structured method for crisis de-escalation, for having those incredibly tough conversations. The goal is to see how this might empower, child welfare workers, foster families, anyone supporting kids in placement, to offer something concrete beyond just hoping for the best.
Okay, so where do we start? The foundation, RFT.
Let's start right there. With the science. RFT begins with a pretty fundamental idea about being human, maybe even a stark one.
Which is?
Which is, if you're a human being who can use language,
Yeah.
you are inevitably going to experience psychological distress at some point. Sadness, fear, anger, anxiety. It comes with the territory.
So it's not seen as like a defect or something wrong with you if you feel distressed.
Not at all, according to RFT. It's presented as a natural consequence of having this incredibly complex language-capable mind.
Okay, but animals feel distress too, right? Fear, pain.
They absolutely do, and that's a really crucial distinction the sources make. RFT differentiates between the experience of distress and the struggle with distress.
Okay. Tell me more about that distinction. Struggle.
Think about it. An animal feels fear when a predator appears. It reacts, runs, fights, freezes. The threat passes, the fear subsides, it moves on.
It doesn't lie awake that night thinking, what if the predator comes back? Was I brave enough?
Exactly. It doesn't ruminate. It doesn't catastrophize about future threats that aren't actually present. It doesn't judge itself for feeling fear. That extra layer, that's the struggle.
And that's where language comes in. Language enables the struggle.
That's the core RFT argument. Language gives us this amazing ability to think abstractly, to plan, to remember, to connect things. But it also gives us the capacity for this struggle with our own internal experiences.
And it often leads to what the sources call an unhealthy struggle.
Yes. And unhealthy in this context means behaviors that become narrow, rigid, inflexible. We get caught up in our thoughts about the feeling, rather than responding effectively to the situation.
So we analyze the anxiety, compare it to last time, worry about it happening again, judge ourselves for feeling it.
Right. We fight with the feeling, try to suppress it, avoid situations that might trigger it, all mediated by language. I shouldn't feel this way. This feeling is unbearable. If I feel anxious, something terrible will happen. That cognitive entanglement, that's the struggle language makes possible.
So psychological problems in this RFT view aren't just about having tough feelings. They bubble up from the mix of having language and then using it to get stuck in this inflexible fight against those feelings.
Precisely. It's about the relationship you develop with your own internal experiences, a relationship built and maintained through language. Psychological issues aren't deviations. They're part of the natural, if sometimes painful, outcome of how language works.
Language gives us both the capacity for complex distress and the tools to get really tangled up in it.
You got it. And it's not happening in a vacuum.
Right. The sources mention our environment, our history.
Absolutely. Our personal history, our culture, the environment we grow up and live in, they heavily shape how we learn to use language, what things get related together in our minds, and how often we run into situations that trigger that struggle. History's influence, they say, is rarely overstated. Makes sense, right?
Totally. Our past experiences teach us how to relate things, including our own feelings.
Exactly. Now, when RFT talks about language or verbal behavior, it's using a specific technical definition, broader than just talking.
Okay. And the core technical concept is that mouthful, arbitrarily applicable relational responding, ARing.
Airing. Yes, it sounds complex, but the core idea is actually graspable. RFT proposes that the basic building block of language isn't the word itself, but our ability to relate things, words, objects, events, feelings, in ways that don't depend on their physical form or properties.
The arbitrarily applicable part, meaning the relation is based on something else, like social agreement.
Exactly. It's based on social convention, learning history, context, not physical similarity. The relation is applied arbitrarily relative to the physical properties of the things being related.
Okay, that euro coin example from the source really helped me click with this. Can we walk through that again?
Sure. Imagine you have a €1 coin and a 50-cent coin. Physically, the €1 coin is often smaller, right?
Yeah, I think so.
If you only responded based on physical properties, what RFT calls non-arbitrary or formal properties, you might think the bigger 50-cent coin is more. An animal might respond that way.
But we know better. We know the smaller coin is worth more.
Precisely. Because our verbal community, our culture, has arbitrarily assigned a higher value to the smaller coin. The relation more valuable than is applied based on social convention, completely independent of, even opposite to, the physical size. That's AARing in action.
The relation is arbitrary relative to the form.
Got it.
And naming things is like the most basic version.
It's a perfect fundamental example. The word cat, the sound, the letters C-A-T, has absolutely no physical resemblance to a furry, purring animal.
Right.
But we, as a verbal community, have learned to relate the word cat and the actual animal as, in a sense, equivalent. We coordinate them. That relation is entirely arbitrary based on their physical forms. AARing is that fundamental ability.
Okay, so A-ring lets us connect things in our minds based on social learning, not just physical reality. And the sources say this is the foundation. Everything else language does builds on this.
That's the idea. Once you have this basic ability to arbitrarily relate things, those relations start to interact and combine in predictable, almost automatic ways. The simplest is mutual entailment.
Which sounds like if A relates to B, then B relates back to A.
In a specific corresponding way, yes. It's likely one of the earliest forms of relational responding we learn. If I teach you that A is bigger than B.
My mind just automatically knows B is smaller than A.
Exactly. You derive the second relation, B to A, automatically from the first A to B, without anyone needing to teach you B is smaller than A separately. It's mutually entailed. It happens derivationally.
Okay, that makes sense. Like a two-way street pops up once you establish one direction. But we connect way more than just two things at a time.
Right. And that's where combinatorial entailment comes in. This describes how relating three or more things together affects all the potential connections among them. It's how we build complex networks.
So the example was, if I know A is bigger than B, and I also know B is bigger than C.
Your mind can combine those relations.
Yes.
You derive not only that A is bigger than C, but also, crucially, that C is smaller than A, even if you've never directly compared A and C by size.
Wow. So I can figure out how A and C relate just by knowing how they each relate to B.
Yes, this combinatorial process allows us to understand incredibly complex relationships, hierarchies, categories like family trees, scientific classifications, social structures, without having to experience every single link directly. Language gives us this shortcut.
So we have ARing the basic ability to relate arbitrarily. Then mutual and combinatorial entailment, how these relations expand and connect. And RFT organizes common patterns of this relating into relational frames.
Correct. A frame is just a name for a particular type of ARing pattern. The sources list several key ones they study.
Like sameness.
Coordination, yes. Relating things the same, similar, or equivalent, like cat and the animal cat. Or relating your feeling of sadness to my feeling of sadness.
And difference.
Distinction.
Ah.
Then there's comparison, bigger, smaller, faster, slower, better, worse. Opposition, hot, cold, up, down, good, bad. Hierarchy, part, whole, member category, temporal relations, before, after, now, then. And perspective taking, or deictic frames, I, you, here, there, now, then.
Coordination seems really basic, just seeing things as alike.
It often is the first and most fundamental. Opposition is interesting too, black, white, happy, sad.
And the sources mention something about combining opposition frames, leading to coordination. That sounds weird.
It does feel counterintuitive. But think, if A is the opposite of B, and B is the opposite of C, what's the likely relationship between A and C?
They'd be the same. Or similar. Like, if wet is opposite to dry and dry is opposite to soaked, then wet and soaked are kind of related as similar.
Exactly. Or think not unhappy. Unhappy is opposite to happy. Not unhappy often functions similarly to happy. It's like a double negative implies a positive. It shows how complex these networks get.
And what tells us which frame to use in a particular situation?
That's where contextual cues come in. They're absolutely critical in RFT.
So the words around the things being related.
Yes, or the broader situation. The phrase is bigger than Q's the comparison frame, is the same as Q's coordination, is opposite to Q's opposition. These cues tell your language system how to relate the stimuli in the specific context. The same objects could be related differently depending on the cue.
Okay. Cues specify the frame. And when multiple frames get woven together, that's when we talk about relational networks.
Precisely. While technically any frame involves more than two things, A, B, and the cue, we usually use network when multiple types of frames interconnect to create complex human abilities, like following rules, solving problems, understanding stories.
Like that family tree example.
Perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
It involves hierarchy, parent-child, coordination, siblings are in the same generation, distinction, different family branches, comparison, older, younger sibling, maybe even temporal frames, who was born first. Knowing Sarah is my mother, hierarchy, and John is Sarah's brother, hierarchy coordination, allows you to derive John is my uncle, a complex derived relation. The whole network hangs together through these combined frames.
Okay, this is building a really interesting picture of language. A-oring, entailment building connections, frames organizing patterns, cues guiding the process, networks weaving it all together. What's the final piece, the transformation part?
Yes, the transformation stimulus functions. This is really where RFT connects directly to psychological experience and behavior change. It's the idea that once things are linked together in these relational networks, the psychological functions of one thing can transfer or transform based on its relation to other things in the network.
Functions meaning how it makes me feel, what it makes me want to do.
Exactly. How you react to it, emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally. This transformation can happen without you ever directly experiencing that function with the first stimulus. It happens via the relational network.
So my thoughts about something, the way it's related to other things in my head, can change how I actually react to it in the real world.
Precisely. The soft drink example is simple, but illustrates it. Your friend relates a new drink to your favorite. This new one is better than your favorite.
Okay, comparison frame.
Right. Your favorite drink has positive functions. You enjoy it, you seek it out. Because the new drink is now related as better than your favorite, some of those positive approach functions can transfer to the new drink. You might now choose the new drink, even though you've never tasted it. Your behavior is changed purely by the relational frame.
Okay. Makes sense for drinks. But how does this explain, well, the really difficult stuff, the kind of things child welfare workers deal with?
This is where it becomes incredibly relevant. RFT uses this principle to explain how things like irrational fears, phobias, trauma responses, and self-concept issues can develop and persist through language.
Okay, give me an example, the irrational fear one.
Right. Imagine a child hears scary stories about wolves. Wolf acquires frightening negative functions. Then they learn that a wolf is a type of dog.
So wolf and dog get linked, a coordination or a hierarchical frame.
Exactly. A relation is established. Now, through transformation of functions, those scary negative functions associated with wolf can transfer, at least partially, onto dog.
So the child might become afraid of dogs, even if they've never been bitten or had a bad experience with one.
Precisely. The fear isn't based on direct experience with dogs. It's derived through the relational network linking dog to the scary functions of wolf. Language created and now maintains the fear.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the claustrophobia example? That seemed even more complex.
It shows how entire networks can transfer functions. So the woman feels trapped, that specific word, in multiple areas of her life. Her job feels like a trap, maybe her relationship, family duties.
So trapped gets linked to all these negative, aversive life experiences.
Right. The word trapped participates in these negative relational networks. Then later she finds herself in physically enclosed space, an elevator, maybe a subway car.
Which could also be described as being trapped.
Exactly. The physical context, elevator, gets related via the shared label trapped to those highly aversive life domain networks. Through transformation of function, the intense anxiety, panic, and desire to escape associated with being trapped in her life can transfer to the physical situation of being in the elevator.
Even if nothing bad has ever happened to her in an elevator before.
That's the key insight from the RFT perspective. The phobia might develop without any direct negative conditioning in that specific physical space. It's the verbal relation, the shared frame of trapped, that allows the aversive functions to transform and dominate her experience in the elevator.
That is profound. The abstract concept is literally changing the physical experience via language.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the fractured verbal self-example, that one feels incredibly relevant for understanding the impact of trauma, especially in the context of child welfare.
Tell me about that one again.
It describes a child who experiences abuse from a caregiver, a parent, say. But that same caregiver also says, "I love you."
Oh, wow. Okay.
So in the child's relational network, the experience of abuse and the experience of being told, "I love you," become linked. A frame of coordination, however dysfunctional, is established between feeling hurt abused and feeling loved, or at least hearing the words.
So feeling loved gets tangled up with feeling hurt.
Functionally related. So later in life, this person might find forming healthy attachments incredibly difficult. Why? Because when someone expresses genuine care or love, it might activate that old relational network.
So feeling cared for could actually trigger feelings of fear or distrust, the functions associated with the past abuse.
Exactly. Because love and abuse became functionally linked in their learning history via language and experience, the trauma isn't just a memory. It's woven into the very structure of how their mind relates fundamental concepts like love, safety, and relationships.
These examples really drive home the RFT point. A lot of human suffering isn't some kind of malfunction, but emerges directly from these natural language processes, AARing, entailment, framing, and especially this transformation of stimulus functions.
Yes. It's the power of language, which allows for amazing things, but also creates these possibilities for getting stuck in painful loops.
And crucially, the sources emphasize this isn't just like armchair theorizing.
Absolutely not. RFT comes from decades of rigorous experimental work in behavioral science labs. Its core concepts, they state, have stood the test of time, debate, and experimental scrutiny extremely well.
So it's a research-based, functional, analytic way to understand verbal behavior, not just someone's opinion.
Precisely. And that scientific rigor is what provides the strong foundation for a practical application like the S.T.A.R.S. matrix.
The science behind the method. Okay, so let's pivot back to S.T.A.R.S. itself. Knowing this RFT foundation, what exactly is S.T.A.R.S.? How does it use this science?
Okay, so S.T.A.R.S., based on the source material, is presented as a structured framework. It's designed specifically for communication during crisis moments, for de-escalation, particularly in these high-stress environments we've been talking about.
And built directly on RFT.
Explicitly. It takes those RFT principles, relational frames, transformation of function, contextual cues, and translates them into practical steps for the responder. And again, developed by Dr. Stephen Gonzalez to make this science usable.
And its main goal in practice, what does it aim to achieve?
The primary aim is to provide a clear guide, a sort of roadmap, for navigating an interaction as someone's aggression level changes. It helps the responder adapt their communication to guide the situation towards what the system calls a safe resolution.
And it does this using specific RFT techniques and focusing on those relational frames we talked about?
Yes. The idea is that by learning to recognize the RFT processes happening in the moment, what frames is the person using? What seems to be the function of their behavior? The responder can then apply specific RFT-informed communication techniques to steer the interaction more effectively.
So how does it structure the interaction? It talks about aggression levels.
Right. A core part of S.T.A.R.S. is identifying the individual's current state using 5 distinct aggression levels. This provides a quick assessment tool.
What are they?
Level 1 is baseline, the person's cool and calm. Level 2 is mild agitation, they're starting to warm up. Level 3 is moderate tension. Level 4 is high aggression, the boiling point. And level 5 is extreme crisis, the danger zone.
And you figure out the level by watching them. Nonverbal cues.
Exactly. S.T.A.R.S. puts a big emphasis on observing nonverbal communication as the primary indicator of these levels. It makes assessment a concrete observational skill.
Does it give examples?
Yes, specific ones. For level 2, mild agitation, you might see things like fidgeting, maybe tapping fingers. Their voice might get a bit louder or faster. Eyes might narrow slightly. Posture might tense up. Observable things.
And at the higher end, level 4, high aggression.
The nonverbals become much more obvious and intense. Pacing back and forth, maybe clenching fists, a very direct, challenging stance, maybe sudden, sharp movements. Again, concrete behaviors to look for.
Recognizing these cues tells you the level, and then the system tells you how to act.
Yes, and this is where it gets really practical and technical. Based on the level you identify on the other person, S.T.A.R.S. prescribes specific nonverbal conduct for you, the responder.
So it's not just about reading them, it's about deliberately controlling my own body language and tone as part of the strategy.
Absolutely. It's called prescriptive nonverbal conduct. Your actions are meant to align with the specific communication goals for that level. For instance, at level 1, baseline, the goal is start the conversation, build rapport.
So my nonverbals should be open, like open hands, relaxed posture, calm tone.
Exactly. Comfortable distance, steady eye contact, warm, even tone. Those are the instructions. Your body language should signal collaboration. But if things escalate to, say, level 3, moderate tension.
The goals change.
Right. Now the goals become prioritize safety and establish clear, immediate boundaries. Your nonverbals have to shift to support those goals.
How so? What would that look like?
You'd adopt a more cautious, non-threatening stance. Maybe slightly angled, not directly face-to-face, maintaining a bit more distance. Your movement should be slow, deliberate, calm. You don't want to appear agitated yourself. Voice range calm, but firm. It's about projecting safety and control through your physical presence.
And at the extreme end, level 5, danger zone.
Communication becomes much more direct, emergency commands, with minimal to no verbal alternative, according to the source. Your nonverbal conduct focuses on clear direction, authority, minimizing unnecessary movement. Firm, controlled voice. It's a protocol for using your own presence as a de-escalation tool, tailored to the specific intensity level.
Okay, so S.T.A.R.S. provides this structure. Assess level via nonverbals. Know the communication goal for that level. Adopt the prescribed nonverbal conduct. How do the RFT techniques fit into the verbal side? How do you actually talk to the person using this?
That's the intervention piece. Within the strategy for each level, S.T.A.R.S. integrates specific RFT techniques. The sources don't lay out every single step exhaustively, but they give clear examples of how RFT principles are actively used.
Like using coordination framing early on.
Exactly. At level 1 or 2, when you're trying to build rapport, to start the conversation, using coordination framing is a deliberate RFT application. You use language to find common ground or validate their experience.
Like saying, I can see this is really frustrating for you.
Yes. Or, I understand why you'd feel angry in this situation. You're verbally relating your understanding to their feeling. Building a bridge, a coordination frame. It's a specific technique from RFT used strategically. The source also mentions things like using metaphorical relational networks, maybe at a later stage, to help someone see their situation differently.
Using metaphors based on RFT principles.
Yeah.
Interesting. And applying these techniques effectively means you first have to figure out the person's relational frames, right? Hear what RFT patterns they're using.
Absolutely fundamental. This is the RFT analysis part. You listen not just to the words, but to the underlying relational structure. If someone shouts, "You're just like all the others," you'll promise things and disappear.
I hear you covers a coordination frame, and the negative functions of others, untrustworthy, disappointing, are being transferred onto me.
Bingo. You're hearing the RFT in action. Or if a parent says, "It's hopeless, things will never change, I'm never getting my kids back."
That sounds like a very rigid temporal frame, relating now and the future as fixed and negative.
Exactly. Identifying these dominant frames is crucial because they show you how the person is constructing their reality in that moment and what's driving their distress and behavior.
And S.T.A.R.S also prompts you to think about the functions of behavior. Like, why are they acting this way?
Yes, the behavioral analysis component. What is the purpose of this escalation? For this person right now, are they trying to escape something unpleasant, the conversation, the situation, the feeling? Are they wanting attention because they feel invisible or unheard? Is it about control? Understanding the likely function helps you tailor your response more effectively.
Okay, so observe behavior, assess level, analyze frames and functions using RFT. Then what's the goal of the actual RFT-based verbal intervention in S.T.A.R.S?
The ultimate goal is described as frame transformation. You're using your RFT-informed communication to strategically influence those critical, often rigid relational frames the person is stuck in.
Trying to help them relate to things differently.
Precisely. The sources talk about shifting frames from, say, fixed to flexible, or transforming the function of something from being perceived as a threat to being seen as a potential resource.
So changing that things will never change frame.
You'd aim to introduce language that allows for more flexibility, or changing the "you're just like all the others" threat frame by consistently acting in ways that build a different relationship, transforming your function to resource or safe. This is directly applying the RFT principle of transforming stimulus functions through relational responding. You're using language deliberately to alter how they experience the situation by altering the relational network.
This feels like where the science really connects with the incredibly challenging reality of child welfare work. It's not just about being nice, it's about having a technical way to engage with these complex verbal and emotional patterns.
That's the whole point. For a DFPS or CPS worker, you're stepping into situations saturated with trauma history, fear, anger, deep-seated relational networks built from pain. Just relying on general good communication skills can feel woefully inadequate.
Yeah, when you're facing a kid who sees every adult as dangerous, or a parent completely lost in hopelessness, be empathetic doesn't feel like enough of a strategy.
Right. These aren't abstract concepts then. They're the lived reality you're trying to navigate. So let's make it concrete. Let's walk through how S.T.A.R.S principles using RFT might apply in a typical child welfare scenario. Say you're interacting with an angry teenager, just arrived at a new foster care placement.
Okay, tough situation. Very common. What's step one with S.T.A.R.S?
Assessment. Immediately start observing. What are the nonverbals? Is he pacing, clenched fists, avoiding eye contact, yelling? Based on those specific observable behaviors, you use the S.T.A.R.S framework to assess his aggression level. Is this level 2 agitation, level 3 tension, maybe level 4 high aggression? That assessment is your first technical action.
Okay, I've got to read on the level. Say it's level 3, moderate tension. Now what?
Now, analysis, bringing in the RFT perspective. You consider the potential functions of behavior. Why the anger? Is it trying to escape this unfamiliar, unwanted situation? Is it wanting attention, maybe feeling lost and needing connection, even negative connection? Is it about asserting control because everything feels out of control? You form a hypothesis using the S.T.A.R.S function categories.
And at the same time, I'm listening for the critical relational frames.
Absolutely. What's the language revealing? He's saying things like, get away from me, you're just like the last ones.
Right.
There's your coordination frame, you shouldn't them, and potential threat function. Or, this is pointless, nowhere is safe, it always ends badly. There's your rigid temporal frame and maybe opposition. Safe is opposite here.
So I'm not just reacting to the anger, I'm trying to decode the underlying RFT structure driving it, hearing the shape of his pain.
Beautifully put. You're analyzing how he's relating himself, you, this placement, his past, his future. Okay, so level 3 assessed, functions hypothesized, frames identified, intervention formulation.
Based on level 3, I know the goals. Prioritize safety, establish boundaries, and I know the nonverbal conduct. Non-threatening stance, calm movements, calm voice.
Right. Your physical presence becomes a tool aligned with the assessed level. Then you start applying the RFT techniques verbally, staying congruent with your posture and the level's goals.
How would I use coordination framing there with an angry teen at level 3?
You might use it carefully to validate the feeling without validating aggression. I can see you're really angry right now, and given everything you've just been through, that makes total sense. You're coordinating ICX, that makes sense, with his likely internal state. Finding that sliver of common ground on the feeling, even amidst the tension. It's a specific RFT technique to build a tiny bridge.
And aiming for frame transformation. If he's stuck in that, this placement will fail like the last one, temporal frame.
You wouldn't argue directly, like, No, it won't. That usually just strengthens the frame. Instead, you might use RFT-based language to introduce flexibility. First, validate the frame's premise. I hear you saying that past placements have been really tough, and you're expecting this to be the same. Acknowledge his reality.
Okay, validate first.
Then, gently introduce relational language that points towards a potentially different relation, maybe focusing on the immediate present or a small difference. And sometimes, even when things started rough before, moments can change. Right now, for just this moment, you're here and we're just talking. What's one small thing that might make this minute slightly different than the last place?
You're trying to build an alternative frame, different, flexible, alongside his rigid one, same, fixed. It's about opening possibilities verbally.
That feels much more skillful than just arguing or trying to cheer him up. It is. Or if the frame is, you're just like the others, threat. The transformation involves consistently behaving in ways that functionally distinguish you. It's not just saying, trust me. It's demonstrating trustworthiness through reliable, calm, respectful actions that contradict the threat frame, aiming to transform your function to resource or safe person over time. You're using RFT principles to shape the relationship through interaction.
So the process is observe cues, assess level, analyze functions frames, RFT lens, select S.T.A.R.S strategy, goals, nonverbals, apply RFT verbal techniques, coordination, frame transformation.
You've got it. It provides that technical sequence. Observe, analyze, strategize, intervene using science-based principles. It makes it a teachable, repeatable skill set, not just relying on innate talent or good luck on a stressful day. It gives the worker a map and tools.
Okay, but implementing something this layered, based on a complex science like RFT, that must require serious training, right? You can't just read a manual.
Absolutely. So the sources are very clear on this. Effective S.T.A.R.S use requires structured, dedicated training. They specifically recommend certain methods.
Like role-playing.
Yes, but highly structured role-playing. Scenarios designed around each S.T.A.R.S aggression level and the different steps within the system. So you practice, say, using coordination framing effectively when the actor is showing level 2 agitation. Or you practice introducing flexible language to counter a specific rigid temporal frame being presented.
Scenarios based on real child welfare situations.
Ideally, yes. Tailored to common challenges, maybe focusing on practicing responses to specific functions of behavior like escape or attention-seeking, or practicing how to address those common, critical relational frames you hear from kids or parents.
And analyzing case studies, too.
Crucial for building the analytical muscle. Looking at case descriptions, maybe even video clips, and having trainees practice. Identifying the nonverbals, assessing the level, spotting the likely frames. Oh, that sounds like an opposition frame. Hypothesizing the function, and then critically formulating a S.T.A.R.S RFT-based intervention plan. What techniques would you use here and why?
And getting feedback on that whole process.
Definitely. Structured, interactive feedback. How well did they follow the S.T.A.R.S flow? How accurately did they apply the RFT concepts? Did their chosen technique fit the situation? How did they adapt if the client shifted levels? It's coaching on a technical skill set.
What about after an incident? These situations are incredibly stressful for the workers, too. Does S.T.A.R.S address that?
Yes. Thankfully, the sources indicate it does consider the impact on responders. They recommend a structured debriefing protocol.
A specific way to process what just happened.
Exactly. Not just venting, but a structured review using the S.T.A.R.S RFT framework. What level were they? What frames did we hear? What techniques did we try? What seemed to work? What could we do differently next time? Analyzing the functions. It helps process the event and reinforces the learning.
And acknowledging the emotional toll.
Yes. The system points towards incorporating psychological first aid concepts and emphasizing self-care. Providing resources, teaching stress management techniques, ensuring access to mental health support, promoting peer support, all seen as vital for preventing burnout and mitigating the effects of trauma exposure inherent in this work.
That holistic view seems important. The sources also briefly mentioned enhancing the system with things like cultural sensitivity.
Right. Recognizing that culture shapes language, relational frames, and how behavior functions is crucial for adapting the approach effectively and respectfully across diverse populations. And also thinking about team-based de-escalation, how multiple responders can coordinate using the S.T.A.R.S framework. These suggest areas for further development and refinement.
Okay, let's pull back to the big picture. For that child welfare worker facing these immense challenges daily, what's the core advantage of S.T.A.R.S, grounded in RFT, compared to other communication approaches?
I think the fundamental difference, the real takeaway, is that it offers a science-based technical pathway through the interaction. We started by talking about relying on soft skills or intuition, which can feel vague, inconsistent, and leave you feeling lost when it doesn't work.
Like trying to navigate a storm with just a feeling about which way to go.
Good analogy. S.T.A.R.S, being built on RFT, this experimentally validated science of language and cognition, provides a functional analytic perspective. It gives you tools to understand why the communication is breaking down based on how language itself works.
So it's not just about being calm or empathetic, it's about understanding the underlying behavioral science of the frames and functions driving the interaction.
Precisely. Identifying specific relational frames, hypothesizing functions, applying targeted techniques like coordination framing or methods aimed at frame transformation, all based on observable cues and scientific principles. These are concrete, teachable skills. It moves beyond subjective opinions about good communication into a realm of technical proficiency.
It gives workers a diagnostic lens and a structured toolkit based on science.
That's the idea. S.T.A.R.S, as described, aims to empower workers, to give them a clear, research-informed method for stepping into chaos and distress. It provides a process, a structure, grounded in behavioral science, which can hopefully increase confidence, consistency, and ultimately effectiveness in those critical moments. It's a technical map for a very difficult terrain.
A science-backed map for the minefield.
You could say that. An application of behavioral science principles to the incredibly complex world of human verbal behavior under pressure.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, it really makes you think about the sheer power of language, doesn't it?
It really does. That fundamental RFT insight. The very tool that lets us think, plan, connect in amazing ways, language, is also the tool that allows us to get so tangled up in psychological struggle because of how it lets us arbitrarily relate things and transform their functions.
But understanding those technical processes, ARing, entailment, frames, transformation, gives us a scientific window into how that struggle happens. In others, and maybe in ourselves too.
And a system like S.T.A.R, using that RFT understanding, offers a practical, technical way forward. It's not just about managing a crisis on the surface. It's about engaging with that underlying human struggle using scientific principles.
It suggests that by analyzing those relational dynamics technically, maybe we can intervene more effectively, help shift perspectives, foster flexibility, maybe even transformation, not just containment.
That's the potential. So the final thought for you, the listener. How might understanding these underlying verbal processes, relational frames, function transformation, change how you approach your work? When you hear a child's rigid fear or a parent's absolute hopelessness, what if you could hear the underlying frames? How might that change your strategy, your interaction, maybe even the outcome?
And maybe take it one step further. How might understanding these RFT principles apply to your own experience, your own stress, your own struggles in this incredibly demanding field? If our challenges often come from that struggle with distress, fueled by language, could gaining a technical understanding of that process offer you more flexibility, more resilience in navigating your own internal world too? A technical understanding not just of others, but of yourself.